Good morning. Our first session in Track A is a practical AWS FinOps in cloud session. Our speaker is James Freeman, a senior technical account manager at AWS. His passion for empowering others through automation continues to inspire engineers and businesses to unlock new possibilities in IT. Today, he will be sharing insights on achieving balance between innovation and keeping control of your cloud spending. Let's give a warm welcome to James.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. We're starting a little bit ahead of schedule. I've been told if I run over, they're going to cut my mic off, so I'm going to do my best to keep to time with this. As said, I work for AWS in London as a senior technical account manager, so FinOps is something I accidentally became an expert in. And let's get into it. So I think everyone here has probably been around technology enough that they know what it's like when you consume technology in an on-premise environment in a data center. Procurement cycles are long, you have steps in your spend, and when you do use technology, you'll use it until it dies or until your service contract runs out with your hardware supplier, that kind of thing. It's a very different model to working in the cloud. And one of the interesting things as well, once you've procured that hardware, you're going to want to max it out. You're going to want to use it to its highest capability. You don't pay any more or any less, apart from the power, depending on the amount you use it. The world of cloud is a little different, and I'm sure everyone here is working on AWS, you kind of know this already, right? You're going to get bill shock if you're not careful, and the more you use the cloud, the more you're going to pay. That's kind of the key differentiator between an on-premise and a cloud model. Now, that doesn't mean that that's a bad thing. It's just a different mindset, and the whole goal for today's presentation is to take you through the FinOps mindset, financial operations in the cloud, why that's important, and what it is that we need to be thinking about. Because these are some of the key things that are here. You've got a really low cost of failure in the cloud. If you procure something, it doesn't work out, you can shut it all down. There's no wastage, no cost, no assets to dispose of. The procurement is instant. We know that. You can spin things up basically at the click of your fingers. And the other thing that's really great about the cloud is when you dig into it, you've got virtually real-time access to your cost data. So whereas when you procure kit, you rack it, you've got to start thinking about allocation to cost centers, you've got to think about invoicing cycles, that kind of thing. With the cloud, you can see within a very short time frame what your spend profile is looking like. So what we've got here is a kind of cycle. I'm not going to go too much into this diagram because we've got lots of content to get through in the time I've got in this presentation. So let's get into the meat of this. What is FinOps? What is financial operations? So a little bit like DevOps, which took the world by storm, 10 years ago, maybe more now. FinOps is basically an amalgamation. It's the process of bringing together finance, technical operations, and indeed the very technical side of IT. And FinOps is quite a big thing. I didn't realize this before I started getting into this. So one of the key roles of a TAM at AWS is to look after the financial operation of our customers. And what we've got here is a link to the FinOps Foundation, so you can sign up to that. You can learn plenty more about FinOps if you want to. And one of the things that you find is that FinOps it's one of those roles that actually crosses all the business units. So you need executive sponsorship for it. You need finance and procurement sponsorship. You need buy-in from your engineering and your operations teams. You basically need buy-in at the entire level for this to work out. If you don't, it's not to say it's going to end in disaster, but the more buy-in you've got across all levels of the business, the better it's going to go and the smoother it's going to go. So when you start out, these are some of the things that you need to think about here. And the key thing across all levels in the business, across all cycles, is education, because as I say, particularly if you've come from an on-premise mindset where you procure and rack your own hardware, the mindset around FinOps in the cloud is very, very different. Like I said, it's not bad, it's just different, and it's getting used to that. You have to think about who owns things. If you're empowering your developers, your engineers to spin up resources by the tens of thousands, then you need to make them somehow accountable, responsible. You need to make it very clear who has ownership for the bill for AWS. Otherwise, you very quickly risk losing control of where your spend is. There's a lot of ways that you can optimize cost, that you can save cost on AWS. It's very simple to start resources on AWS. It's a very different thing entirely to start thinking about optimization and engineering for cost optimization and for saving money. Cost tracking is absolutely vital. We have a cycle that we use with our customers internally. We sort of term it as see, save, run. But the most important thing about that is you need visibility for costs. If you can't see what you're spending in the first place, if you can't break it down in some meaningful way, then you're really going to struggle to actually do anything meaningful with that data. So education is key, reviews are key as well. That last point, that's one of the things that as TAMS we're really responsible for with the customer. It sets us apart, I think, as AWS as a trusted partner with the companies that we work with. So we're very happy to organize reviews. We sit down with our customers to actually say, okay, this is what your spend profile looks like. We're seeing this increase in this category. Have you thought about this? And I'll present some more details in a minute on the sort of options that we tend to present to customers to save money. Now, I touched on the concept of ownership, and how do we actually think about that in a business context? Well, to start with, AWS has a lot of constructs that will help you define ownership in the first place. Probably the worst thing that you can do is set up one AWS account, put a corporate credit card behind it, and just get everyone to use that, because you will lose track of who's using what before you can think about it. So AWS organizations, a very powerful feature, not just for billing. I'm talking about this from a cost management, from a financial operations point of view, very valuable from a security point of view as well, for putting in guardrails, that kind of thing around what people can and can't do. So if you're at the beginning of your AWS journey, definitely look into things like AWS organizations, landing zones, that kind of thing. It's really, really important. And there is basically no cost associated with doing that. That's something that you can do almost for nothing. Within those organizations, you'll set up OUs. That's very much like OUs that you'd set up in a directory or anything else. And then we start to drill down to linked accounts. Now, a lot of the customers I've worked with at AWS in my time, they will do things like they have one linked account per department or one linked account per project. So again, an AWS account is not a billable resource like, say, an EC2 instance is. So it's very easy to spin up a new account, have that dedicated for a project, and then you know that the charges in that account are linked to that project. It makes accounting for things at the end of a billing cycle very, very easy, very, very straightforward. At the bottom tier, probably the most granular level, but also the most difficult, you've got your resources. So this is your EC2 instances, your Lambdas, your VPCs, all of that kind of thing. And they're the one that people tend to lose track of. They're the one that it gets complicated under, because these are the things that you're going to have maybe tens of thousands of across your organization. And as I say, you use constructs like organizations, OUs, links accounts, that kind of thing. But even within them, you're probably going to want some sort of subdivision. And this is where cost allocation tagging comes in. So what I've done here, I've put some examples of some tags here. These are just examples. There's no right or wrong way to tag as long as it works for your business. And I think that's the important message there. The one thing I do want to highlight about this, though, is have a tagging dictionary. It's very, very simple. It's something I've seen companies trip up on so many times. So, for example, we've got over there, let's pick that top row, project. I've gone into customer accounts. You've got project with a capital P. You've got project with a lowercase p, which is identified separately because it's case sensitive. You might have project -name, project underscore name, something like that. And because people don't quite know exactly what the tag should look like, you get lost. You start getting this mix of tags, all of very slightly varying names, and it makes it very difficult to decipher who spent what on what project or in which cost center. So tagging, very important. Tagging dictionary, more important than you can imagine, actually. The other thing that I want to highlight here, so if you are getting into your AWS journey, we have that link at the top, and I've generated the QR code for it as well. The well-architected labs. Now these are free labs, they're available to anyone, so there's not something that you have to be an AWS customer today to get access to. There's loads of valuable information in them and practical exercises that you can follow along with in your AWS account. So definitely give them a go. I would imagine we're distributing the slides at the end of this as well if anybody wants the QR codes. Do we know if we're distributing the slides? I didn't think to ask that. I'll work that out later, don't worry. Okay, moving on, I'm checking on time as well, cost visibility. So at the end of the month, you get your bill from AWS and it'll have a number on it. That's great. How do you actually know if things are under control, if people are spending too much money, not enough money? How do you know if there's maybe a shadow IT project going on somewhere? There's all these questions that really, if you have oversight of your AWS spend, that you should be asking and that you should be keeping an eye on. Now, we have a lot of tools available to help customers keep an eye on their costs. AWS Cost Explorer, one of my favorite tools. I spend a lot of time in there on behalf of my customers looking at things. It's free. It's there. It's a little bit like Excel graphing. All sorts of filters. You can dig into your data and dive down into it on any number of levels. Very, very powerful. Basically, as I say, it's just there for free. You get it. So it's very much worth using. If you need more detailed data than Cost Explorer provides, then AWS Cost and Usage Reports, they're probably the next place that you want to be. And Cost and Usage Reports, there is a small cost associated with them for storing the data in S3, also for using tools like Athena. But when you start getting more complex with your setups, these are really, really powerful. I've got customers that need to measure things in, for example, vCPU hours as opposed to instance hours, just because that's their internal accounting metric. You won't get that out of Cost Explorer. You will get that out of the Cost and Usage Report. So they do add that extra layer of data granularity and detail. Then probably one of my favorite things that we offer to customers, and again, other than the licenses for QuickSight users, it's free. Cloud Intelligence Dashboards. Now these are really powerful. They cut the data in so many different ways and present it to you in very digestible ways. You can break down your instance spend, your storage spend, your networking spend. Very, very powerful. The amazing thing I think for me as an AWS employee is they're free, they're open source. You can find the definition for the dashboards on GitHub. You can deploy them, and as I say, the cost really is basically the cost of deploying in QuickSight. So again, we've got some well-architected labs on these. I've got the link up there to it. Again, this is something you can deploy today and try in your own AWS account. And personally, I'm a big advocate for this. So some examples of the dashboards. There are demo sites that you can go to as well. I haven't got the link for that, unfortunately, but if anybody wants to get in touch afterwards, then obviously we can talk about that. I'll share it. These are the kind of ways that you would want to slice the dashboards amongst the business. So you can see that there are some that are more high level that will be more suitable for executive or finance and procurement departments, right through to the ones that get really granular over on the right-hand side, which are down at the FinOps practitioner at the engineering and operations level. So of these, what you really value is going to depend on your role in the business and what you want. And I think we could spend a good hour going through the dashboards, what they do, what the value of each one is. We haven't got time for that today, unfortunately, but I think what I really want to do this morning is just raise awareness that we have this, that it's there for customers to use, and there is a lot of detail in it, and it's suitable, as I say, for all levels of the business. And I think that's the most important thing, is The team that's thought about this have put a lot of time into engineering this for the appropriate levels within the business. So it's not just something that we've thrown out there, it's something that we've really put some engineering time into. Now the bit you've all been waiting for, how do you get your bill down? How do you save money? So this is, I suppose, the run book that as a TAM I look to with my customers. And there are two ways you're going to want to look at this. The axes that we've got on the graph here, basically, what is the cost savings impact going to be on the y-axis, and the technical complexity. Now, that's the key bit on the x-axis there. So if you're doing something really simple, if you've done like a lift and shift migration and you're using EC2 instances, a really simple way to get your costs down is if you know those instances are running 365 days a year, we have what we call commitments, so instance savings plans and reserved instances, that kind of thing. They give you a significant discount on the on-demand rates. They're for the kind of resources that you know are going to be there day in, day out and running. Ideal for lift and shift migrations. Where you perhaps have more elastic workloads, so I've worked with customers where, for example, they shut a lot of resources down at the weekend because the office is only staffed Monday to Friday. So obviously there's no point paying for the resources over the weekend. If you're doing that, yes, you need to review carefully whether commitments are right for you, but you're instantly saving maybe 2/7 of your cost because you're shutting down the instances for 2 days of the week. There's a lot of reporting that we have. You'll find some of this mentioned in Cost Explorer, some of it is in the dashboards that I mentioned, on identifying underutilized resources. We have a number of ways of monitoring that to make sure that you can see if, say, a load balancer has been getting very minimal to no traffic for a period of time. So we try and help our customers identify the idle resources, the resources that can easily be deleted. Over as we move to the right-hand side of the graph, it gets more complicated. So this is where you might have performed a lift and shift migration, for example, to AWS. You've got EC2 instances, maybe RDS databases, that kind of thing. And this is where we're taking a look at things like a move to serverless, for example. So updating instance types, simple things like that. So one of the big things that's up and coming I'm seeing at the moment is Graviton. So the move away from x86 to ARM64 architectures. There's quite a big cost saving on our Graviton instances. And if you're using our serverless platform, so RDS, for example, managed services, I should say, then it's very easy to shift to a Graviton CPU platform. Literally, it makes no impact on your software. You can just change over today and save some money. Moving from the older GP2 to GP3 EBS volumes, that saves people money. And then right at the sort of most complex end of the workload is the right sizing, but also right at the top there, top corner, most savings. When you get further down the road, can you make your architecture cloud native? So can you actually move away from static resources like managed services, so say an EC2 instance, an RDS instance, and move to something serverless, so something where you're literally paying for the compute time that you need for a transaction to happen, as opposed to paying for all the idle hours when nobody's running a transaction through it. That's probably the most complicated thing you can do, so that's very much in the realm of your engineering and your developers, but it's also the most powerful lever you have. It's probably the one that most customers sort of look to move towards in the long term to save themselves money. Now, let's take a little look at tracking and the data for this. And I really want to touch on this briefly, making sure we've got time. We do. So, what does good look like? And this is one of the classic paradoxes of IT, is over time, IT seems to consume more and more resources, more and more money. And I think there's still a view that exists today that IT is a cost sink. It's incredible. We live in a world that's driven by technology, and yet most companies look to the technology portion of the balance sheet as a cost sink. Now, if you're doing more with your technology, if you're serving more customers, if you're handling more transactions, whatever it is that the nature of your business is, you're going to spend more money. You're going to need more IT resources. That's a given. So over time, your spend is going to go up. Like I was saying at the beginning, it's not necessarily a bad thing. And I think we need to get more nuanced than the older mindset that is more spend is bad, less spend is good. The ideal way, and this is the best practice that I would advocate for my customers, is what's your unit cost? So your cost per transaction, for example. So this will be very individual to each business. What does your business do? If you're handling transactions, then per 1,000 transactions, how many dollars do you spend on infrastructure? And ideally, what you should be seeing is that over time, the cost per transaction goes down. So that's how you could look at efficiency. You know your cost of overall is going to go up. That's not what you should be looking at, because that's a given. As long as your business is successful and growing, your IT costs are going to go up. What you want to be doing is getting more efficient as time goes on. I put some KPIs up here by way of example. These are by no means all of them, but these are some sort of best practices that you can look at. And really, they sort of give us the idea. What you want to do, as is suggested here, pick 3 KPIs. There's no right or wrong way for this, and every business will have different requirements. Every business will know what its success looks like, But it's so important to just know, okay, what are we doing? What does our unit cost look like? How do we define that unit cost? And then we can start to actually work on optimizing that. And it's all about feedback loops. This shouldn't ever be a one and done thing, and I think that's the case with most things in IT. So feedback is key here. You should be tracking things. We've talked already about the visibility and the tools that AWS provide to keep you visible, keep your eye on what's going on. We need to work out as a business what to prioritize, what's important to us, what is going to keep our customers happy, what's also going to make us more efficient, what's going to drive that cost per unit down. And communication. A feedback loop doesn't exist without communication. So are the teams talking to each other? If finance and procurement have concerns, are they being talked about? Are they being communicated back to the engineering teams? Are they driving into the roadmap? If they're not, then there's a problem. The loop is incomplete. So it's all about having those complete loops, making sure that people are talking to each other openly. No recriminations, just open conversations. Let's look at this. Let's edit the roadmap so that we're driving everything in the right direction. Now, sort of moving towards the end of the cycle that we talked about earlier, reviewing. So, the cloud intelligence dashboards, there are customers that we work with where we will base reviews with the customers on the dashboards themselves. But whenever we're doing reviews, think about who's the stakeholder. It's the classic rule for a presentation, know your audience. Someone at a C-level is not going to be interested in the minutiae of which EC2 instances you've run and what the breakdown of them is. They're going to want the top level data, the KPIs, that kind of thing. So think about what data do they need to help them do their job, what format works for them. There's probably a lot out the box that works today, but it's just important to have that in the back of your mind. Who are you communicating the data to, and how are they going to receive it? Now, the other thing that I want to mention very quickly before we move on, if you're following along, particularly if you're interested in the cloud intelligence dashboards, out of the box, cloud intelligence dashboards give everybody access to everything. And maybe you don't want every developer to have access to the entire company's AWS financial data. That's quite a realistic thing. If that's the case, and I'm imagining it's going to be, then there is an additional set of processes that we can layer on top of cloud intelligence dashboards called row-level security. And that starts to give you granularity over who has access to what, so that maybe a particular department can only see the data that's relevant to them. And again, QR code linked to that in the slides. Finally, bringing this to a close, onto the education piece. So, lots and lots of tools available here. They're worth spending the time digging into, where you've got teams that are responsible for costs, so engineers who are spinning things up. Educate them, help them to understand how they can track what good looks like, help them to know what the tools are available for free today, so that they can be part of the solution rather than this age-old cycle where people who spend the money because they span up a resource are viewed as, let's say, a problem, worst case scenario. There's so many of these tools. So Cost Explorer I've already mentioned, but you can set budgets in AWS. You can see recommendations for the commitments that I talked about earlier. We have anomaly detection in there today. We have right-sizing recommendations. So If you spin up a super big EC2 instance and it's barely getting touched on the CPU utilization, our systems will automatically detect that and recommend you to spin up a lower instance. They won't make the change automatically, but they will make the recommendation. So they give you data that empowers you to make the right decisions. And then cost and usage reports that I've mentioned already as well. Now, just to reiterate this, but I think that this really illustrates for me how importantly AWS views the journey of the customer and their ability to keep control of their cloud costs. All the tools on here, apart from the cost and usage reports, are free. They're there for everyone today. You don't need to necessarily be on an enterprise support subscription or anything like that. They're just there out of the box. And even the cost and usage reports, the cost of them is negligible in the big scheme of things because most of it is the S3 data that stores it. Getting a little bit more detailed and also into some of the chargeable services that we offer for helping you optimize. Compute Optimizer, that one's not chargeable. Again, well worth looking at to see if you can figure out how you can further optimize your EC2 instance costs. Trusted Advisor, loads of recommendations in there. I recommend that everybody be looking at Trusted Advisor, but not just for cost optimization, for security purposes as well. AWS Config, number of times I've had customers need to look at that for things. And CloudWatch, this one very often slips through. So we don't have time to go into the detail of it, but AWS has something called the shared responsibility model, and basically that says we're responsible for the integrity of the cloud. You as the customer are responsible for what you run on the cloud. And so, for example, we at AWS, we cannot see into your EC2 instances. We can't see what the memory utilization of them looks like. And so if you don't install CloudWatch and gather all the metrics, we, even with the best will in the world with an enterprise support subscription, we can't actually help you look at what your memory footprint looks like and whether that can be optimized. So well worth looking at. An S3 lens as well. If you're a big S3 object storage user, very powerful tool for visualizing your use of S3. So bringing this to a close, loads and loads of resources available for furthering your FinOps journey. There's some really good material on YouTube, live streamed on Twitch every week. I've updated the schedule. Thank you. QR code there should take you to most of the information that you need. And I think we're pretty much out of time, but that's about it from me. I'm in Hong Kong until Wednesday, so if anybody wants to have a chat, the 2 QR codes there just to make my life confusing. But the bottom one is my social media, is my contact details. If anybody wants to reach out, feel free to use that. The top one, session feedback. So if anybody does feel inclined to leave me feedback, I would love that. Thank you for your time this morning. It's a pleasure to be here.